Alrighty, and we are live. I am joined here today with Concan. Concan has been a long time viewer of my channel, and I've been lucky enough to interact with her one or two times through our mutual friend Little Gray Cells, and she's joining me here today because we are discussing the sex ed curriculum that is being pushed, the radical sex ed curriculum. We're also going to be talking a little bit about Andrea Horwath and her standoff with Doug Ford, and then we're going to finish up talking about the Pride Parade that went on in all across the world just this past month. Actually, I think it was June was Pride Month, and there's plenty of things to dislike about Pride Month without having to come off as being anti-gay, which a lot of people will take it as. But anyway, Concan, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself, and then we'll get into her.
Hi, I live in Halifax. I love the ocean. I don't like the city, so in 2 weeks from now, I'll be moving to the actual middle of nowhere, which I cannot wait. Um, I noticed things changing in my city a long time ago, but I didn't know what was going on. And such as yourself, I was actually introduced to this whole red pill process by some people at my job, but also through Little Gray Cells. And it's entirely my pleasure to be able to sit here and talk to you because I really love your channel. I love what you do. Your research is very, very well done. And you definitely know how to put it all together so that it makes sense for everyone.
Well, that's all I'm trying to do here. I mean, like I told you a few minutes ago, I started off really trying to be more like a Joe Rogan, just sort of a little bit of everything. But as I got more into politics and I started looking a little more behind the curtain, I just got more fixated on it. And now it's almost like an obsession for me now in a lot of ways. I spend all day, whenever I'm not working, I spend the day browsing the news and trying to figure things out. I'm slowly becoming another Little Gray Cells with a bunch of documents filling up my computer, reading through them all. Yeah, so...
Oh, it takes an unbelievable amount of time, doesn't it?
And that might be actually saying something about me. Maybe I just have too much time on my hands.
You know, the thing is like I find the same thing. I'm obsessed up until recently, where I am actually going to be starting my own business soon. But right up until I decided to do that, I was obsessed with learning about all this stuff, and I was in a car accident, so I was off work and I couldn't watch YouTube. I couldn't have any screen times. I had a concussion. But I would just turn on all these shows, your show, Little Gray Cells, Black Pigeon Speaks, all the usual suspects, and just listen to everything while I was just kind of laying there. And I couldn't believe the things that were going on. And then I started reading the news and finding out politically the things that were happening, like actually locally. And then I went, holy fuck. And I would be laying in bed at night, can't sleep, and up till 2 a.m, like listening to this stuff, because it's really hard to express how it's all hidden right in plain view. Like once it's pointed out to you, the things that are going on, you can't help but see it. And then you tell people that and try to get them to see it, and they just think you're crazy. It's just the weirdest phenomenon.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been trying to take it in little doses with the people that I'm talking to, my family, my friends, whenever the stuff I'm bringing up, just because I kind of have that same thing. People are going to think I'm crazy. I'm waiting for somebody to call me like an Alex Jones or something like that. Although I actually am under the sneaking suspicion that Alex Jones is a little bit crazy, so...
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I completely agree with you there. The guy is not playing with a full deck.
Well, anyway, so today we were going to start off talking about the sex ed education that's been going on, and the sex ed that was pushed in Ontario has been very radical. It's been dealing with stuff like gender identity, and it's been dealing even like some of the sexual acts that we have, and it's starting from a very young age, which is the thing that is really concerning me when it's doing this. I'm not even a parent yet. Still at least a couple years away from that. But I could understand why a lot of parents would be very, very concerned with everything that's going on with this sexual education. So that was for me when I was watching the election going on and Doug Ford was talking about repealing the sex education. That was one of the big promises that I voted for him for. And so far he's been doing that. I mean, there's been a little bit of confusion with that. They repealed it back to 1998, and then they're sort of. And then there's been some more confusion about that, how they're going to keep certain aspects of it. But for me, it was just pushing the liberal ideology, the left-wing ideology, into our school systems, which we've had for some time, but not quite like this. I mean, starting at grade 1 is just too young for a lot of these things, and they're teaching them stuff such as consent. And when I was talking to my wife about it the other day, I said, "Whatever happened to you show me yours, I'll show you mine," like we used to have back in the schoolyard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, everyone who's watching. I have to give a shout out to everybody, but I'm super happy to have my friend Randall Johnson watching this show. He has just been one of my longest time friends and super supportive, and him and his wife Danielle are unbelievable folks. So it means a lot that he would take the time to watch this. Danielle's probably working. And thanks to everyone who is watching that. This is really cool. The sex ed thing, I'm telling you, like you said, the whole red pilling thing, it takes a little while. And I've actually put out a number of videos regarding like the invasion and that sort of thing. And as you keep pulling back the, proverbial layers, as they say, it becomes more and more apparent that that's really not where the problem stems from. But there's a lot of background push for people to be divided. From what I can see, the ultimate goal is to just take society and cut it into as many tiny separated groups as humanly possible, so that everyone is fighting amongst themselves. You know what I mean? Like black people fighting against white people, and white people against black people, and gays against straights, and men against women. And holy fuck, if you can divide it, they want to, right? Back in the day, it was the gay folks were like the kind of for lack of a better word, like a new thing where people are like, oh, I don't know about gays. And now being gay is mainstream. Like now you're seeing like transgender people all the time. And it's very odd to me. Like initially I thought it was like a mental disorder. I really did. And then of course, Little Gray Cells presented a couple videos, and one specifically that got taken down before anyone had a chance to watch it, about the genetic changes that are happening in, say, frogs, for example, where male frogs are turning homosexual and then laying eggs. So, I mean, things are definitely happening in our biology structure, but I don't think it's appropriate to normalize it. And I got to get judged for this because I don't know that I'm expressing it very well. But for me, let's say, for example, you're depressed or you have anxiety. Most people would be able to say to themselves, I feel like, my stomach, I get uncomfortable when I'm in certain situations, or, I feel depressed or I feel sad for a really long time. I think there's something wrong. I should go see my doctor. And I would think that if I was a person who didn't understand my gender, that I would say, this can't be normal. There's got to be a problem here. I need to find out how to fix this. And to me, it's almost like we're doing the transgender community a disservice by just kind of normalizing it, by saying, it's absolutely normal. And what scared me was when I registered my kid for school. As I said, I'm moving in a couple weeks, and I deliberately moved myself and my kid out to the middle of actual nowhere because I was hoping to get away from this. And what you find is that even in these country hick schools, this is absolutely the norm. Like, for example, a friend of mine, Red Pill Canuck, sent me this copy of, it's called Growing Up Okay, and it's part of the Nova Scotia curriculum. And here's a portion of it. It says, most people are pretty sure about whether they are a boy or a girl. Most of the time, how you feel inside matches how you look outside, but not always. You may feel that you are in the wrong body. That is, you have the body of a girl, but you feel that you are a boy. Or you have the body of a boy, but you feel that you are a girl. If you feel this way, you may be transgender. Now, this is in the actual curriculum, and it doesn't actually tell you what age this is directed at, but at the beginning of the writing here, it says somewhere between the age of 8 and 16, puberty will begin. So I'm thinking if you're looking at puberty at 8, then this information is directed at least 8 or younger, right?
I think that's I think that's fair to say, yeah.
So to me, I don't know. I feel like there's a problem if we are looking at 8-year-olds and seeing them hitting puberty. And I'm not saying it's not happening, but from my perspective, when I look at things like, say, food, for example, everybody eats chicken breast. Everybody wants to be healthy. They're eating chicken breast. But if you're not eating like organically raised, non-antibiotic, blah, 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 blah chicken, you're getting hormones that are making those chickens' breasts huge. And that's because people want the big breast, whether it's on a chicken or on a woman, right? That's what they want. But what I'm noticing is that you see these little tiny girls, like 11 or 12 years old, tiny little things with these huge boobs. And you're like, her mom doesn't have that. It's not a genetic thing. She's very little. What's happening? And my theory, and obviously I'm not a doctor, but my theory is that those hormones that are in that chicken are having a residual effect in our kids. So I think like not only are their boobs getting bigger at a very young age, but the rest of puberty, I think, is happening at least as a partial result of the chemicals that are fed to our food in order that they grow faster, to mature faster, so we can harvest it faster.
I think you're onto something there because one thing that I've discussed with a few different people is it seems like a lot of the children that we see these days, they don't go through their awkward puberty period where they seem to be just now they're fully formed men and women. You know, there's no pimples
Totally.
anymore. A lot of the younger girls look like they could actually be like almost in adulthood at this point. So I think you're onto
Oh,
something
yeah.
when you're talking about that. I wasn't aware though that it also reached out to other provinces. I'm sure there was a few other ones, like maybe Quebec or something, which is a little more of a left-wing province. But I wasn't aware that it also this sort of education and also hit out to the Maritimes. I completely understand why you want to get your kids off the grid.
Well, I'll tell you, I lived on the prairies for a long time, just myself and horses. And then when I had my daughter, I moved home because I was hoping to get away from all this nonsense on the prairies. And when I came here, I found that it was just so much worse. Like way worse than you would ever imagine Nova Scotia to be. Like when I picture Nova Scotia, and maybe other people don't picture it this way, but I kind of feel like Nova Scotia used to always be about 10 years behind. Right? I remember there was no smoking inside anymore, and still you could smoke walking around the mall in Nova Scotia and throw your cigarette butt on the floor and step on it. So, it was always so far behind. But I'm telling you, I actually left Costco one time, and this is not to do a sexual thing or anything, but I left Costco one time with a full container of groceries because I counted 6 hijabs, like within where I was just standing there. I felt surrounded.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The other day, I was walking down to go get, with my wife, we were walking down to the corner store to go get cigarettes.
Yeah.
And it's maybe about a 5 minute walk or so. I'm not kidding you. She was the only woman out and about that was not covered up. And that was
No
a little
shit.
concerning to me. Yeah, it's just the idea that it was like there's so many women that were covered up. And
Yeah.
they try and display it as it's some sort of modesty thing, like it's supposed to keep them pure or against a lot
No.
of the things that go on, a lot of the sexual harassment that'll happen. But it's really just a control thing when we're talking at the end of the day. It's all about controlling the woman and her actions and her body and everything about it. It's just I don't agree with it at all, but it's something that we're importing right now. Meanwhile, we're encouraging our own children that it's okay to be sexually active at younger ages.
Oh my gosh, it's so disgusting. Well, here's another section of this. It says everyone has a sexual orientation. But I can understand teaching kids about brush your teeth, clean your body, right? Brush your hair, shampoo yourself, wear clean clothes, don't pee your pants, that kind of thing. But when you're talking to your kids about sexual orientation in school, to me, that's something your parents should be talking about, not you're talking to you about. That's no business of the government to be talking to my child about that sort of thing. And to me, it's also one of those things that should come up on a once in a while basis. It shouldn't be normalized. It shouldn't be like an option. But it says here everyone has a sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is your feeling of sexual attraction towards others. You could be attracted to people of the same sex, the opposite sex, or people of both sexes. I don't know when they're going to add in their goats and sheep or whatever, but right now you've got both sexes. People of all sexual orientations can have healthy relationships and happy, fulfilling lives. Now, this is the part that I thought was really interesting. When you feel that you're in the wrong body, you may be transgender. If you feel this way, you may find that puberty is very difficult. This may be because your body is changing in ways you're not comfortable with. If you need more information on being transgender, you can call the Youth Project. So it's not talk to your parents. It's not, anything like that. It's call us so that we can tell you that you're okay and come on in and we'll tell you how to be transgender, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, that's really concerning. Yeah, because I've seen some footages of sort of the things that they end up pushing on kids and parents as well. I have some mixed feelings about the YouTuber Steven Crowder, but I do like his undercover videos that he
Same
does.
here. I'm mixed feelings with him as well, but I'm with you on the undercover or the change my mind.
Yeah, I do enjoy his Change My Mind as well. But there was
Yeah.
one in particular, maybe you saw it. It was the one where him and his co-host, they went undercover to one of these transgender. It was like a town, and then maybe not take a town hall type thing, but they were talking about children and who were going through who were transgender, and they were being encouraged, like they were presenting as if they had a child that was struggling with this, and they were being
Yeah.
encouraged that as young as 3 years old, they should be put on hormone blockers already.
Yeah.
They're a little child, and
Yeah.
they were also suggesting that it's like, well, if they decide to transition back, which kind of funny because it means if you started with a boy and then decide to go back to being a boy, then you're just sticking with your actual sex. But they were saying that it wouldn't have any real repercussions on their development when it absolutely would. I mean, the puberty is one of the biggest transformations you ever have throughout your life physically. And if you're
Yeah.
going to block that, if you're going to cause that to be, if you're going to cause that to be, affected, then there's going to be problems with that. I mean, I would like to see what, for instance, if somebody who was a child who goes through puberty blockers, then gets off them later on, let's say a boy,
Ah.
how are they going to be able to produce, like, I think that could actually be affecting how they produce sperm, and which could affect them having children in the future. It's a very dangerous
Same
idea.
thing with women. They can't go back to being a woman after you've an actual like childbearing woman after you've done all these things to your body. And the thing is that I don't care if you cut off your arm or your leg or your pecker, you're still not going to change what gender you are. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm going to take your DNA and you're still going to be the same gender that you were before I pumped you full of hormones and cut off your dick. I don't know. It's
Well,
annoying.
the way I understood it before when we're talking about transgenderism is, and growing up, is I thought we were all just being nice, like we were treating them as if they are a man or a woman, but we were all very much aware that they weren't. It was more just being respectful of their choices. But now it's
That's
sort of
right.
like, no, they are actually a man. They are actually a woman. I remember in one episode of the Joe Rogan podcast where he was talking about this, where he was. They were talking about Fallon Fox, which is the male to female mixed martial arts fighter, and
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
there's been some controversy there as well. Just the fact that that Fallon Fox was started out as a man. But
Yeah.
someone was actually arguing to Joe. He said that someone was arguing that even when he was a man, even when he had children with another woman, he was still technically a woman. And I don't see how that works out that way.
Well, I know there was, and I'm now have woken up to the Ben Shapiro situation as well, of course. But he was talking about a newspaper article somewhere in the States where it was like, man gives birth to baby, and it turns out it was a woman who had transgendered into a man. Like, so he's like, the headline should really be woman gives birth to baby, but of course they have to give you a big headline full of bullshit. It's really amazing though, the wording. I'm finding words are so strange. The way that people say things, for instance, even something as simple as facts. I used to say, here are the facts, and now people say fact pattern. It's just weird the way that people talk nowadays, I even find.
And I think it's because that's the first step of changing the narrative, is changing
Yeah.
the wording around.
Yeah.
One thing I've been noticing actually is that Lil Graces and I, we're right now we're working on a project where we're just going through a bunch of the crimes that are being reported, and we're
Yeah.
doing this through police reports, newspaper articles, social media. But I've been noticing that when it came to especially dealing with sexual assault, they don't really seem to name the men who
No.
commit sexual assault when they come from when they're immigrants or anything like that. They'll
No.
just constantly say the man or the
Yeah.
accuser. But then whenever it's somebody who is Canadian, someone who was born
Yeah.
here, suddenly they have no problem. Even sometimes in the
Yeah.
headlines, right there's the name of the person.
John Smith rapes little
John
kid.
Smith,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Muhammad Ali, or was it Adam Abdi there? That fucking
Oh,
the spree shooter in Etobicoke, right? Brampton man, and you look at him and you're like, that's a fucking Somali man. I don't care what you say. Look at that forehead.
yeah, absolutely. And even dealing with that too, because he's been in the paper a little bit recently. They were talking about how he was a child refugee, but then when I was looking him up, he was a child refugee in the year 2000. It's been 18 years since then. He is no longer, by records, a child refugee. But this is still
Oh,
what they're calling him.
come on now. You know damn well he just needs a hug and a puppy.
Just like those damn ISIS
Dude,
fighters.
fuck those ISIS guys. If you could just get them to focus their energy on haiku writing, Boise, Idaho, man, they fucking rule this place.
Oh,
What gets me about these people, like back to, sorry, I'm going off on a different topic.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say what gets me too about like what we were talking about the border crossers is the amount of pedophiles and other types of bad criminals. There was some program I watched the other day, and I watched so many YouTube channels that I can't think of the name of this person, but it was somebody who does these like 10 things that whatever. And one of the things he did was 10 countries or countries that have no laws. And it's like Iraq, Somalia, like all these African places, right? All the places that we are bringing people from, they come from countries and cultures that don't have laws, right? They have no problem. If I have something they want, they pull out a knife and they take it. And how are you supposed to it's like trying to take your friendly neighborhood saber-toothed tiger and integrate him with fucking Santa Claus and the reindeer.
Huh, that's a very interesting way of putting it. And I've been trying to figure that out when it comes to the border crossers, about how many have criminal records, how many are violent criminals, how many are pedophiles. But that information isn't very readily available. I find I've been having some difficulty discovering it, but I know they're there. Especially because if we look towards our southern neighbors, America, they're having a lot of the same problems when it comes to people crossing the Mexican border. There, a lot of the people
Right.
coming through. In fact, one of the main arguments when it comes to the whole the parents getting separated from children that some people are talking about is, without the paperwork, they don't know that if this person just abducted a child and then used them to cross the border, which it has happened in the past before. There have been many different occasions where they are
100%.
abducted. So
Yeah,
you never know. It could be very much the same thing. And when
that's right.
my biggest problem with these people too is when we look at them, like the people crossing our border right now, is you look at the way they're coming in. They're coming in with Abercrombie and Finch shirts. They're coming in with chains. They're coming in with Beats
Cell phones, three
headphones.
or four cell
Mm,
phones, fucking suitcases. Oh yeah, they're no more refugee than I fucking am.
exactly. I mean, like, there's people here who are living in worse conditions than a lot of the people that are coming
We
across the
have
border.
veterans who can't afford a fucking cell phone. We have veterans who are missing body parts and can't buy medication because, well, of course, as you know, these friggin' veterans are asking for so much more than we can just give them right now.
Oh,
God damn
absolutely.
it.
But then,
Right?
we have all this money to throw away. I mean, a little while ago, I was checking out how much money they were just wasting on research. Simply alone, just research,
That's my
millions of
favorite.
dollars.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like a few million here for this subject, 20 million there for this subject, and it wasn't for any actions. It was just, as Trudeau put it, I think it was for better. How did he put it? It was a made up word. It was, I don't even think it belongs in the English language. It's for not preparedness. It's for I don't remember the word he used, but it was pretty much just saying the research was just so they could figure out a better way of dealing with the situations, which that's not even taking into account like actually putting it into action. Same problem
Yeah.
I had with what they're doing with the ISIS fighters is that they're saying that it has that all this has to do with their whole project that they're doing and bringing back and reintegrating these ISIS fighters. It is more towards research than actual action. So how are we supposed to put this into play?
Right. Well, not only that, I mean, I cannot stop thinking about this poor Yazidi lady from from London, Ontario. You heard about this lady who had been captured and kept as a rape slave by ISIS, one of these Yazidi women. And then she's on the fucking bus in London, Ontario, and there's the guy on the bus who fucking kidnapped her and raped her.
I didn't hear about that part. I heard
Jesus
that she
fuck.
was. I did hear a
Yeah.
story about getting captured and being kept as a sex slave. I didn't know that the guy who captured her was sitting on a bus.
Sitting on a bus in London, Ontario, and she went to, now don't quote me on this, but she went to like the refugee people or the human rights people and told them, she's like, this is the guy and this is his real name and this is his ISIS name and blah blah blah. You know what they told her? Don't tell anyone.
What?
You fucking kidding me? Yeah, don't tell anyone.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
That's what I've been told. That's what I heard and I read in the newspaper. But again, you can't believe any of this shit that you read. But that's what I have been told. One of my subscribers sent me an article about it.
Oh, Jesus. I
Can
feel
you
so bad.
imagine? That fucking woman? Can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
Oh, I can't imagine at all. It's not just necessarily even a one of the more regular cases where we hear somebody getting groped or assaulted in public, but this,
Right.
she was kept as a slave.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I feel terrible for this woman that she had to
Yeah.
even deal with that. And those are the sort of people that I want to bring in as actual refugees, is
These are
someone
the
like this
people who
Yazidi
actually
woman.
need us.
Exactly. There was something like 7,000 Yazidi women who ended up getting captured by ISIS and forced into this sort of life. Those are the sort
Yeah,
of people we should be taking in. But when we look at the
that's
type of
right.
people we are taking in, it's amazing the number of just single
Men.
adult men that are coming in through the
Yeah,
border. And those are the people who are most likely to commit crimes such as this rather than even the family members. But if we look at the papers, they love plastering the families all around. Or if you look at whenever they show video footage, it's always families that they show crossing the border.
that's right.
That was actually one thing I liked about when Rebel Media went down to the border is they showed that it was a
Yeah.
lot of single men that were crossing over.
Yeah, single men with lots of, it seemed like money and plane tickets. They would cut them up and throw them on the ground and that sort of thing. Um, but what was I gonna say? There's a funny guy in our chat, Arjun Sinha. I hope I said that
Oh,
correctly. He's funny.
oh yeah,
And he
Arjun
says
is my
he's,
Indian buddy.
oh yeah, right on. You know, when I lived in Regina, I had a ton of Hindu friends, and where I worked at a call center, we always had potlucks. And I'm telling you, the homemade Indian food that would come in, and these Indian people, from my experience, the Hindus and Sikhs, from my personal experience, are the most sweet, gentle, lovely folks, and it makes me angry when people lump them in with Muslims.
And actually, the thing about that too is when we're talking about Sikhism and Hinduism, and I learned this from Arjun actually, because he's been on my channel a few different times, and we're actually going to
Yeah,
be doing another live stream again soon. But
cool.
he's told me that both those religions were actually created for the sake of pushing back against Islam, because at the time, years ago, when Islam was starting to come across India, it was a way to unite the Indian people against what they saw as an invading force. Well, it was an invading force, I should
Yeah,
say. So I
yeah,
really have
yeah.
a lot of respect for their religion for that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, my understanding, and it's very limited, is that like in India, and I don't know if it's a religious thing or not, but there's a lot of arranged marriages, but it's not like a forced thing like they do with Muslims where they're like, I need you to be a political ally. It's more like, oh, I think anyway, and I don't know much about it, but from my experience, they tend to all kind of enter into it willingly. It doesn't seem to be a forced thing. And when I started at my job, I was the only white person on our team of 13 people, and I was the only girl. And I never once had to hold a door. Every Indian man held that door for me. I never, it was like, I don't know, there's a whole different way that they seem to look at their women. It's like they do actually treasure them. And I know in Islam they say, oh, this is why we cover our women because we treasure them, blah, blah, blah. But they don't treat them well. But it seems like Sikhs and Hindus, or maybe it's just people from India, seem to be very respectful of women.
And you know what is actually from my personal experience dealing with Indians too? They are some of the hardest workers I've ever seen in my life. I used to be a supervisor at Tim Hortons,
Yeah,
and I was
I was a manager at Tim Hortons. That's so
oh no
funny.
way.
Yeah, it was a Cold Stone one. Man, was I ever fucking fat.
Well, one thing about it was whenever the resumes would come across and I found out that our manager was going to be hiring another Indian man or Indian woman,
Yeah.
I always tried to get them on my shift with me on the night shift because I knew that they were going to be very hard workers and always very friendly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just watched a video on YouTube, and again, I'm not 100% who it was by, but it was about Abu Dhabi, and they did sort of the compare and contrast between the really rich Muslim like people who have huge palaces, and there's like this massive multi-billion-dollar mosque that's just like unbelievable. And they talk about how people go everywhere in limos and this and that, like the Muslim folks. And at this exactly the same time, on the water is like this huge community of Indian folks who fish. And their community, they have these boats, and they all work together, and they'll have like one boat where everybody does their laundry and one boat where everybody cooks. And it's like this huge community where everyone just sort of works together, and there's none of that like divisiveness that seems to be maybe among like the ruling class, I guess. You know what I mean? They just sort of are like, if I can help you, you're gonna help me, and that's how, to me, that it should be, regardless of where you're from. But it seems like the Indian folks are, it's very a tight knit community.
It is a very tight knit community, and that's something that I miss from our own culture right now. Is there's a lot of divisiveness right now, and I think that comes out of politics a lot because, especially when we're talking about the way that the left wing ideology goes these days, a lot of it has to do with just the idea. It's sort of, I believe, like we may have even stated already, the whole divide and conquer type of deal where they try and split everybody up, get everybody fighting with
That's
each
right.
other, and then they can sort of swoop in and see themselves as the savior in a lot of way. I think is what they're trying to do, and it sort of goes back to that idea of tolerance, that like how tolerant they are and how yeah, I guess there's just the whole idea of tolerance that comes out of the left wing, which is I've always said before is the more you play the moral high ground, the harder it is to fall when you come down.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing one of the things that I'm finding to be really annoying, and I don't know if it's people on the right, people on the left, or just people in general. I don't really like to categorize people and say, "Oh, I'm on the right, I'm on the left." I just want to live in peace, and I don't want to bother you, and I don't want you to bother me, and please don't try to kill me. Like, don't spray chemicals over my house, don't fucking GMO my fucking food. Like, just leave me the fuck alone and let me live and have my family. You know what I mean? Um,
Absolutely.
but I don't know what it is about. I find people are very hateful. I tend to, I don't spend a lot of time interacting with people if I can help it, but when I do interact with people, I kind of like to do funny social experiments. And so I did this social experiment once. I was stuck on a bus. I don't know if I told you about this. My car was in the shop and I had to take the bus. And I have a car because I don't want to take the fucking bus. It stinks and it's gross and people are yucky and ooh, yuck. So I'm on the bus and I thought I'm gonna sit here with like a fucking idiot with a happy grin on my face, and I'm gonna smile at every single person that comes on and just see what happens. So I did. I sat there like an idiot with a stupid look on my face. And the first girl came on and she was a black girl and she looked at me like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And I was like, "I hope she doesn't beat me up." So she went and sat down, and then this other girl came on and she was a black girl as well. And I smiled at her and she gave me this lovely smile and she carried on. And then it was a funny thing to me because some people just ignored me. Some people gave me dirty looks or whatever. Some people smiled. But then this family got on, and I didn't necessarily know right away that they were a family. It was like a dark skinned girl, but she looked maybe Mexican. And what looked like her mom, she was probably in her 20s, the mom, and then this big, huge, like dark guy with like a jihadi looking beard and sloppy and big and overweight. And I smiled at him and he smiled at me and he gave me the most gorgeous smile I had seen. And he sat down across from me and I was like, "Oh my gosh," I said to him, "your smile is unbelievable." And we just started yapping, and it turns out he was from Texas. Him and his mom had come to Halifax to visit the daughter who was in university. And I said, "Oh, fuck, right, here we go, university." I said, "What are you studying?" And she said something good, like chemistry or something good. And I was like, "Oh, good, not fucking gender studies or some stupid ass program like that." She's like, "No, God, no." But it was just an interesting thing because I don't know. I was brought up to believe that inherently people are good. But then when you see the way that people live in other countries with other cultures and just the way they interact, it's scary to think that there are people over here that would pin you down and rape you just as fast as smile at you, you know?
What I've always said in concern to that, like the whole people are born inherently good or inherently bad, is I've always said that people are born inherently selfish, and that selfishness manifests itself in two different ways. Because either you'll be selfish and you'll only care about yourself, or you do care about other people. And there is, I guess, a little bit of selfishness in when you do good things for other people, in that it makes you feel good. But
Yeah.
that's the way I've always kind of looked at it, because never really knew how I felt one way or the other. I didn't believe that people were born inherently bad, but also at the same time, I wasn't sure if people were born inherently good. So that's sort of
Right.
my take on it. And I don't know whether it's a good one or a bad one, but
That's funny. It just reminded me of that episode of Friends with Phoebe when Joey's like, "You can't do anything for somebody else without feeling good." Do you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Like, yeah, that's so funny. Don't you remember her stepping on or letting a bumblebee sting her? And Joey's like, yeah, now it's gonna die. And she's like, fuck. But I don't know, and I have no problem with immigration. And when it's people who want, well, you know what? I'm on the fence because here's the thing. Maybe you've seen this demonstration. There, it was a doctor, university professor. It was like the marble thing when you take all the good folks from countries and you put them in here, and there was like containers with marbles. It was a great explanation of immigration. But for me, if you come to a country, I don't care if you're in Canada and you're going to Afghanistan, or if you're in Saudi Arabia and you're coming to Canada, you need to learn the language, you need to learn the rules, you need to learn how to interact with people, and then you need to decide whether or not you can live with that. And if you can, then bring it on. If you want to come and have a job and contribute and be a slave like the rest of us and pay taxes and, have the government steal our money and be part of that, then that's great. But if you want to come here because you know that you're going to get welfare and that the more children you have, the more welfare you're going to get, and you're just going to sit on your ass pumping out kids who are going to be ruining my country and are already financially bankrupting us. And I get it. It's not their fault, right? They didn't wake up one day after living in fucking huts and shit for however many years and decide, hey, let's go to the Western countries. They were led here. They were encouraged to go here. I'm that level of awake that I know what's going on in that regard. And so the more I find out, thanks to little gray cells, the more I do feel bad for these folks, because who wouldn't? If you were living in a shithole country with your family scraping to try to get by, who wouldn't lift themselves up and go somewhere where they know they can get free money?
Absolutely, and that's I guess is one of my biggest problems with our current federal government, is that they're just encouraging everyone to come in, and they're not encouraging anyone to adapt to Canadian society. In fact, it's the other way around. They want the rest of us to adapt to the way that they do things, which is not the way it's supposed to go. It's supposed to go that it's like, we'll let you in, but it's our rules, it's our house, you got to play by our rules. But that's not how it's going right now. Which is why one thing I'm actually happy to have Ford at least as the premier of Ontario right now, because he seems to be he doesn't seem to be interested in that. He's actually much more interested in people adapting to the way that we do things. And
yeah.
But he's getting a lot of flack because of it. I mean, ever since even before he became premier, Andrea Horwath has been giving him a hard time about the way he does things and the way he's, like, whether it's the sex ed or the immigration crisis. She's just at every single point is taking everything she can to hammer him.
You know what? When she's handing out her fucking personal cell phone number to her constituents and friending people, I'm friends with Doug Ford on Twitter. And you know how Twitter will go through and unfriend you and unfollow you from people.
Yep.
And that's happened to him and I a few times, and we always come back and refollow each other. And he doesn't know me from Adam, but he is that guy who is available to the people and responsible to the people. And I really feel that the people have an expectation that people in politics or in higher authority or whatever are going to be fucking perfect. And it blows my mind, because they're nothing more than people who are trying to do the right thing. None of us are doing the right thing absolutely all the time, every day, day and night. I just don't see it. It's just not the way it is. But this guy is trying, and his heart is in the right place, and his values are in the right place. He can see that the Canadian people need help, and he doesn't care who he has to stand up against in order to put himself between, I feel like, us, and I know I'm in Nova Scotia, so it's got nothing to do with me, but I feel like he is willing to put himself between us and the bullshit that we are having thrust against us. And for him to stand up and agree to change that sex ed curriculum for this year, God bless his fucking heart. And that bitch, if she wants to give out her cell phone number to all of her constituents to call her day and night and tell them their problems, then you know what? Then she can badmouth Doug Ford. I don't understand how having basic common values and playground rules, right? If you go to an elementary school and there's a bunch of kids playing soccer and they're running around playing soccer and you come in and you pick up that soccer ball and you volley it, you're going to have a fuck ton of kids after you to tell you to follow the goddamn rules or go find somewhere else to play. That just seems like basic, playground rules that a 5-year-old can grasp this. Why does it not apply to the whole country? If it applies to a soccer field and it applies to my own personal house, you can't come into my personal house and tell me how to live my life. Why should you be able to do that in my country?
Absolutely, I'm with you 100% with that idea, and absolutely. When it comes to Doug Ford, I find that the other thing about it is he responds when we're talking about him when he gives out his number or when he follows you on Twitter. I've actually sent him a private message before on Twitter, and he responded. It may not have been long or anything. I understand the guy's busy. Yeah. But he at least responded to acknowledge that he received the message. And the thing that I sent him a message about was back in, I think it was mid-April, I became aware of a hashtag on Twitter. It was called hashtag Ontario Election Integrity. And it seemed to have to do with a lot of PR firms were now part of the Ontario Public Service Pool. And because of this, some of them were actually even lobbying people to register for voters, which when so many were connected to the Trudeau Liberals or the provincial Liberals, it seemed like it was manipulating what was going on. So I sent him a message about that, and he acknowledged, and he was like, okay, thank you for letting me know, we'll do something about this. And I don't know what he ended up doing about it, but the fact that at least he was willing to respond was awesome. And I think it's this sort of idea that the fact that he has that connection with the people, that's actually the biggest threat to people like Horwath. It's, for some reason, like this idea of populism where you're actually doing what the people want seems to be a threat to people on the left. And they say, well, that's actually a terrible way to go about things. And they try and make some reference such as like, well, Hitler was a populist. I think that's a terrible, terrible example. But the whole idea is that you're actually doing what the people want you to do rather than getting into office and saying, okay, I'm going to do what I think is best now as me and my core group of people right here that think the same way. But he's actually going to do it differently. And we're already starting to see that. A lot of his campaign promises, his big ones, that he's already following up with them. And he's not even a month in office right now. He's already fired the $6 million man and pretty much the entire board of Hydro Ontario. Hydro One, sorry. It's pretty much they've all resigned. He's already started to make changes to the sex ed curriculum.
Yeah.
But for some reason, he gets called a radical because I don't know if you saw that video by Steeper33 that came out a day or two ago. But it was just Andrea Horwath in the during question period was just calling him a radical and making reference to people like Tanya Granick-Allen.
Tanya Granick-Allen, which I don't have a problem with Tanya Granick-Allen. I really don't. I'll tell you straight up. I mean, I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus. But I do believe that if you took the 10 Commandments and just had them written down on a piece of loose leaf paper and somebody picked it up off the ground and it said, way to live your life on the top of it, as opposed to this is the 10 Commandments, you could read those 10 Commandments and be like, you know what? If I live like that and everyone else lives like that, then we could all pretty much do our own thing without fucking up anybody else's shit.
Well, that's like just it too. It's supposed to be like the whole live and let live thing. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they try and paint Tanya Granick-Allen as if she's a super radical, which she's not, and I'm not even religious in the slightest. But she didn't bug me when she came in, and even when she was talking about some of her things had to do with her religious beliefs, I didn't care. That's the way she's lived her life. That's the way she sees the world. But she wasn't in any way condoning violence or anything of the sort against people. Her real problem was the fact that it was manipulating children through the sex ed curriculum.
Right.
And, I mean, she had every reason to. It's not like Patrick Brown really stood up for those sort of values or anything to do with that. He pretty much was more compliant with Kathleen Wynne than anything else.
Yeah, totally.
I was upset with the way that he was treated, but at the same time, I wasn't unhappy to see him go.
You took the words right out of my mouth, because he was a scumbag, but the way that he was let go was, if he had been a good guy, that even still, like, it's just not appropriate for somebody under an accusation that turned out to be some chick having a regret or two. That's not right.
Absolutely. And even when I started seeing the evidence that was being compiled and what other people were saying against them, it was just showing that it was a lot of crap against it. And my
Yeah.
big problem with that is that there are real cases out there of sexual assault, rape, and other things of the sort. And whenever you conflate these two, you're just minimizing all the other cases. And the problem is that I'm even seeing with my own perspective is now when I hear things like that, I'll question it for a little bit, and you shouldn't have
Yeah.
to. It should be one of those things that it's like, if that's the case, then we should do something about it immediately. But the fact that there are real victims out there that are now
Yeah.
having their story questioned is concerning.
It is. I completely agree because even myself as a female with a daughter, when I hear these stories, this whole Me Too movement, this bullshit, that's what I think of it. My first reaction is to think as if that didn't happen. You know what I mean? Because I've been pushed, I've heard so many bullshit stories. I've heard it. um, here's an example. I don't know how else to explain it. The way that they, and I mean they in quotations, make everything so, I don't know what the word is, emergency. So for example, this is the only way I can figure out to explain it, is that on my phone it says you are dangerously low on space. Like, what's going to happen? I'm dangerously low. If I run out of space, like, am I going to die? Like, it's dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, the words that they use to get reactions out of people. And I don't know how to say that other than to give that example where it's like, is my car going to blow up? Is my life in danger because I don't have enough space left on my phone? It's weird. But back to the sex ed thing, here's a funny little tidbit. My kid is in a daycare, and easily half of the kids in her class are Islamic. And of those kids, again, at least half of them are straight from Saudi Arabia. Parents are here, on a government funded program of sorts. And um, so of course all the birthday parties, all the kids, all the parents, and so over the last couple of years I've gotten to know a lot of these people, and I've talked to a few of these moms about this curriculum, and it's just amazing to me the things that they and I completely agree on. One of the moms, a few of the moms and I have talked about it. It's funny to be like the only white mom sitting at a table with a bunch of Islamic people in hijabs and covered up, but at the same time, like, their kids are all the same age as my child, and I'm showing them this documentation and talking to them about these things. And one of the moms actually came to me one time and said something about the transgender, and I was like, oh God, like, don't even get me started. And that's how we kind of opened up about that. But we've been talking about the curriculum, and what she said is that in Saudi Arabia they don't learn anything about sex until grade 10, and it's specifically in relationship to when you get married, right? They teach you all the scary stuff that they should teach you, like, if you do this, you're gonna get HIV, gonorrhea. Here's the picture of what it looks like. Don't this is gonna be your penis if you stick it over there. You know what I mean? And that to me is kind of, not necessarily they should scare kids, but like, it shouldn't be something where you're like, oh hey, or like that video Faith Goldie did for the Ontario school where they were talking about giving blowjobs and stuff in the grade 7 health class. Did you see that?
I heard about it, but I didn't actually watch the video yet.
Oh, it was pretty bad, with the poster of a guy giving another guy a blowjob, and you could see him with his fingers up the guy's ass, and it's like a full-size picture on the wall in a grade 7 classroom, and it says in big bold letters, "Do you like to fuck?"
Wow.
Yeah, no shit. No, and this was like 2013, I think. Yeah, it was just like, what are you fucking doing? Are you kidding me right now?
And just that idea too, it's just the unnecessary normalization, if that's the proper word for it, of something like whether it has to do with transgenderism or even when it comes to homosexuality. I mean, I don't have a problem if somebody's gay. I mean, you do you, it doesn't bug me. I guess that's more my libertarian side talking.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the fact that we now have to say, well, we need to teach our children about it. We need to go and tell them about what it's like to be gay, and they also present this idea in their head that that specific people are against them, even though it doesn't really seem to be the case. I mean, my wife and I have a friend. It's actually more her friend. She's known him for years. He's gay, but then he's also under this impression that anybody who's conservative, religious, is like completely anti-gay. Like after the election, like the way he was talking about Doug Ford, it was like he was going to force gay people back into the closet when he never said anything remotely close to that. Not the words never even came out of his mouth and about that. But this is actually, and it's just, this is also the problem that I have when we're discussing the whole Pride Parade thing, is that it's not just people going out, like they always in the media, they show the pictures of them just waving their flags or whatever, like I'm gay, but it's like, that's not the way it is. They have people on leashes. They have guys that are crawling along the ground.
Yeah, you have like people with no pants on.
Yeah, they're completely naked.
Yeah. Arjun, yes, grade 7 class. It's under, if you look it up on Faith Goldie on YouTube, it was back when it was Brian Lilly and what was that? The Sun or what the hell? I think it was the Sun.
Oh, the Sun News Network?
Yeah. He was just asking about, did I hear that right? About the grade 7 class, but yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty fucking bad. And yeah, I don't think these kids need to know anything about that other than like don't do it, because you're gonna end up with a fucking kid you don't want. The Pride Parade to me, I think, is such a weird thing, because I'm with you. I don't care what your sexual preference is unless it's to do with kids or animals. And it doesn't matter. It has absolutely no bearing on your ability to, I wouldn't think it should have any bearing on your ability to make decisions, to have a job, to go to school, to drive a car. I don't walk around going, hey man, I'm like the most proud heterosexual person you ever saw, dude. Let's have a fucking parade. Really? You want to be proud of something? Get a good job and donate to a good cause, or spend your time feeding the homeless, or walk fucking dogs at the SPCA. Don't be proud because you're willing to fucking take a guy's in your, there's just no, to me, there's no anything there to be proud of. Nothing to be, the Pride Parade itself is a fucking disgusting debacle of yucky grossness that I can't believe our taxpayers have to pay for, because you couldn't get my child in the vicinity of that. It's offensive. It's visual sexual assault on the public, paid for by our tax dollars. And well, to be quite honest with you, I'm going to go to the Pride Parade here in Halifax, but I have a daycare provided for my child, and I'm going to go to take videos for my YouTube channel, not because I support the crap.
Oh, that's going to be very interesting. I'm going to have to check that out when you do that.
I hope so. Yeah, hopefully everything works out and I can get the daycare and everything I need to do it, but there's just no way you'd get me down there for my, with my child. It's not a fucking Santa Claus parade, that's for sure.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I've never actually been to one.
Oh, no?
No. Have you been to one?
I've never actually been, but I've been in the vicinity as it's going by, and I've seen a little bit of it. But we didn't stay. We were just walking through the area.
Oh yeah.
But I saw enough in that amount of time.
And that's where I just find, like, you feel like you're living in the Twilight Zone, because, like, the black and white version, because it doesn't make any sense. Here's something that I thought was interesting, and Seamus and I were talking about this the other day. Like, when you have people whose opinions you agree with, or have different perspectives on different things that you agree with, it doesn't matter who the people are. You might absolutely despise them or completely disagree with them, but there's always something that you might find you agree with. And there's a guy called Mohammed Hijab. Have you heard of him?
No, I don't think so.
He's a fucking huge Muslim guy, and if I understand correctly, he's an MMA fighter, and he's massively huge. But he's got a YouTube channel, and he's like all about Islam, all about Islam. And him and his friends go through and they talk about Islam. And one of the things he said that I thought was really interesting, and I could not agree more, is that if feminists were really concerned with their safety and their security and not wanting to be ogled by men, they would wear a fucking hijab. Actually, he said they would wear a burqa. And he's not wrong.
I guess, yeah, I can kind of see the logic behind that, but in exchange of that, we have the slut walk instead.
Well, and that's what I think is so funny. You know, I've got relatives who are millennials that I don't talk to and I can't have a conversation with. But, you know, some of these people, they call themselves feminists, and you see their outfits. And you can see their ass cheeks jiggling under their fucking shorts, and their pockets are longer than their shorts, and they're walking around with no bra, and their boobs are fucking flopping all over the place, and then they get offended when you fucking look at them. Well, I'm not even gay, but I can't look away. You're like, it's like a bad accident. Like, am I really looking at your actual boobs right now? Am I really looking at your actual boobs? Like, what in the fuck is going on? I was driving down the street the other day, and there was a lady, and I could see her from behind. So all I could see was a long blonde ponytail, fishnet stockings, and jean shorts that were like cut so that they covered what a thong underwear would cover, like right up the crack of her ass cheeks hanging out. Big old, you know, slut boots on, and I get past her and she must have been 50.
Whoa.
I shit you not, I almost had a fucking car accident. I thought, if you have children, can you imagine how embarrassing those people are? How embarrassed those children are. It's like people whose parents wear pajamas out in public.
Oh,
you fucking kidding me? Put on some goddamn pants. Like, you can't find a job. It's not because you're black, or it's not because, you know, oh, they don't like me. It's, you can't even get dressed in the fucking morning to go grocery shopping.
And it's not like it's hard, you know. You just it takes 5 minutes or something like that to find some proper clothes. Even
some nasty old sweatpants and a t-shirt is better than pajamas. Fuck. The fucking pajamas. Come on. I'm offended by your fucking pajamas.
That's a good way to put it.
I like is that I'm not allowed to be offended by the things that they say, right? It's just like the weirdest thing. It's so bizarre. We live in bizarro world.
Oh, we really do. And the one thing I'm noticing a similarity too when we're discussing both the Pride Parade and the slut walk and feminists and gay people is the fact that they both seem to have the same sort of idea where their most, if not in their entire core identity, comes from their sexuality than anything else. It's like the fact that they're flamboyant, or the fact that they don't wear too much clothes, like that, it makes up who the person is rather than what they do or what they say.
Yes. It's strange, isn't it? It's not like, hey, I aced my medical exams, or hey, I passed the LSATs, or I helped my so-and-so build a whatever, or I took some food down to the food bank, which you don't want to do nowadays because if it's not halal, right, it doesn't work. But they are doing things that you have no business being proud of, and they just think it's the greatest thing ever. And then when you talk about doing things that are, you know, conservative, I guess, in nature, they look at you like you're just a fucking whack job. It's so weird. It's just, well, for example, I started getting red pilled when this chick who I had sort of interacted with on a daily basis, we became sort of friends on Facebook. And I went to a medical clinic here in Halifax, and I sat down because you can't get a doctor, right? I've been here 2.5 years. I've been on a wait list, cannot get a doctor. So I go into a walk-in clinic, and out of myself and my child, out of all the whole place was packed of people waiting. We were the only two not wearing hijabs except the men, including the pharmacist and the pharmacy assistant. And so on the wall, there was a sign that said whatever it said, and it was in English, French, and Arabic. And I took a picture of it, and I put it on my Facebook page, and I said, English, yes. French, yes. Anything else, No fucking way. And so, oh man, I took the fucking heat. I took heat, and I was like, I'm not racist at all, like, not at all. But I took so much heat that I had people who I was seeing regularly on a daily basis and conversing with who wouldn't even look at me at all. And it's been like a year and a half, and still those people won't talk to me, which I think is so weird.
Oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. I'm also noticing the same sort of thing actually because when I take the bus, so that's one of when I need to go far. I don't drive, so that's one of my main for whenever I need to go far across the city. That's my main form of transportation. And I tell you, I am one of the only people on there that will actually be speaking in English. Everyone else, it's all forms of different language. There's
Yep.
Arabic, whether it's Chinese,
Chinese.
whether it's
Yep.
also I'm hearing a lot of Spanish as well these days, but it's just
Yeah.
like it seems like nobody really integrates anymore. Nobody learns the language anymore, and they just rely on their children to be interpreters for her, which is proven in the past through many different reports and articles that it's actually very stressful on the children. They always have
Yep.
to be with their parents. They have to go everywhere they do, and they're constantly just being the translators for them. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous.
It is so. Well, like I said, with all these children's birthday parties, a couple of the kids in the class are like Korean or whatever. We had a birthday party, and it's funny, of course. Like I said, we'd sort of rotate, and all the kids and parents end up at all the birthday parties. And it's funny to me because I'm typically the only white mom, and it's either the other white mom is Jewish. So, like, I'm white, she's Jewish, and everybody else is either Arabic or Korean. And so we go to these birthday parties and she and I sit and talk to each other mostly, right? Like, mostly actually the most of the Arabic speaking folks speak several languages. I've noticed, like my people that I know from Saudi Arabia, the great English, just exactly like me, and very intelligent. These group of parents, there's one of the dads is a oh fuck, an orthopedic surgeon. One of the moms is a chemical engineer. The other one is like a biology major. Like, it's just amazing to me how smart these people are. But they interact with me and they include me in their life, and they hang out with my kid, and they're just lovely, lovely people. And so it's a weird phenomenon, right? I don't know if you may have heard of the explanatory memorandum.
Don't remember offhand actually. I don't think I
So
have.
back in the day, I think I did a video on it now, if I can remember correctly. I think it was 1991 in Philadelphia, somewhere. I can't remember. Like I said, I have a video on it. There was a state highway patrol man who noticed an Arabic man and woman taking pictures of the structures of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And so, on a hunch, he pulled over the couple, and it turns out the man was um, an FBI wanted for FBI questioning in the Holy Land trials. So police went to his house. They searched his whole house, and in his house, they found a sub basement built under the ground where it had 18 bankers boxes. I think it was 18 bankers boxes filled with documentation from the Muslim Brotherhood. Within these boxes, they found the um, explanatory memorandum, and it was the literal explanation of the plan to take over the West. They the jihadi settlement, no, the settlement jihad, so that rather than infighting, you would go in, chill, and get integrated into the government and education and da da da. And it listed all of their contacts of the Muslim Student Association, all these other contacts. There was a whole list. It was like information they definitely did not want to get out. Um, but one of the things I thought was funny is that one of my daughter's classmates were over there for a birthday party, and the dad is a photographer. And on the wall, he's got these beautiful photographs that he's taken, but one of them was a picture of like the sun setting on, and he was taking a picture from the perspective of standing at the same level on the same height as the structures for one of the bridges in Halifax. And so it was like he was standing at the base of the bridge where you're not really supposed to be standing, taking pictures of the structure. And granted, it's right on the ocean, so it's a beautiful view. But there was a part of me that and I didn't think of it at that point, but after I found this memorandum and I heard the story, I was like, wouldn't that be something else if that photograph was one of those hidden in plain sight things? You know what I mean? And he's right from Saudi Arabia, so I'm like, you always have these questions in the back of your head when people come from these places that have seems to have no problem, hurting other people. I don't know. It's just so confusing.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't hear about that actually. No, but I have heard about something about the whole thing about the Muslim Brotherhood having a plan to take over the West. I have heard of that as well. Which,
So go online just to Google or whatever and type in explanatory memorandum, and you can actually get a PDF of it
all right, I'm going to do
and
that. I'm going
download
to
it.
check that out. That's
Yeah,
going to be very interesting read.
it is. I'll tell you, I read it. I'll see if I can send it to you. I'm not the best technology, but if I can find it here, I will send it to you. When I read it online, I was like, I need to print this off. So I printed it off, and it's funny because the first 18 pages is in Islamic or Arabic, and then the rest of it is translated in English, and it's something. Wow. I printed it off, and the first time I read through it, I cried. And then in my head, I went back to where I was in 1991 when this was found, and I was like, yeah, I knew. I was like, holy shit. And, you could do that back in time kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I
And
think I
it
know what you
was
mean. Yeah, sort of just like place yourself where you were at that moment. Sort of like I do
at the
that sometimes with 9/11.
yeah. Oh my gosh, the 9/11 thing is crazy. Have you seen that movie Loose Change?
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, it's so creepy. You get goosebumps watching it, but the 9/11 thing is pretty spectacular. The way it was planned out and orchestrated, and wow. I mean, just the fact that it had recently been bought and insured to the nines, and the list goes on. That story is something else.
For me, when it came to that, one of the big ones for me was the fact that George Bush kept getting warnings from a bunch of allies that there was going to be a major terrorist attack, and he just kept dismissing them time and
Yeah.
time again. He just pretty much said, like, no, no, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen here. And then a few months
Yeah.
later, like this was all within like something like 6 months leading up to 9/11.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was very, very well planned out. Hang on. I just need to throw my animal in her kennel.
No problem.
Um, yeah, it's very scary, and the things that they say happened, and where are the planes? Can somebody explain to me how a plane that big got into a hole that was that little?
Oh, you're talking about at the Pentagon, eh?
Yeah, the Pentagon. Are you kidding me? Yeah, it just goes on and on and on, and I don't know. There's just so much, and the more you find, like before I started figuring out, again, thanks to Seamus, what was going on and who's really in charge, I was thinking, if this is just an Islamic/Muslim invasion kind of problem, we can actually probably maybe do something about it. But in reality, I don't know if it's something we can do anything about.
I've wondered that myself sometimes. Sometimes I feel like we might be too far gone in order to actually solve the problem. But, I think more and more people are starting to take notice of what's really going on in the world and who's really pulling the strings, that I think we may be starting to have a turnabout here. But it's all about whether people are willing to take the action necessary in order to do something different about it.
That's a true story. It's an interesting, I don't know. It's odd to me. I feel like I was thinking about this morning. Every generation, there's people such as yourself and myself and Seamus and people who are watching us who feel like shit's going to go down, like, and it's going to happen soon, right? You look at Benjamin Friedman and Ayn Rand, who was writing books like Anthem in, I don't even know, 1933 or 13 or however hell long ago it was, that they were sort of predicting all these things happening in their lifetime, and I'm predicting it happening in my lifetime. I don't know how you feel about that. But for me, I'm at the point where I really feel like everybody should be like watching Curtis Stone on YouTube and learning how to grow your own food and stop paying for bills, get your mortgage paid off or get off grid or find a way to take care of yourself and your family, and you know what I mean?
Absolutely. In fact, that's something that I've been sort of leaning more towards lately. My wife actually agrees that we want to eventually get out of the city, get more off the grid to more of a smaller town or something like that, and just get away from all this crap because it's just. I don't like the way that the city life goes or the way that we're supposed to live our lives now. I'd rather work for myself. I'd rather take care of myself, take care of my family, and take care of the people in my around me in my community. And I've been starting to get a little more into that about self preservation and checking out what you can do in order to grow your own food, produce your own supplies, and just sort of get away from all the materialism that we have at the moment.
No, I completely agree. And every time you turn around, it's all about, you got to get the newest this or the most expensive that. And, I see people driving around in SUVs that are Mercedes. And I'm like, hey, that's like a however many $1,000 vehicle that you're not taking that sucker off road, right? I have a 2009 Subaru that's paid for, and I'll take it anywhere I want to take it. I don't have a monthly payment on it. Nobody's going to come and take it away. If it runs like shit, well, I have to just pay to fix it. People are way too materialistic and nobody knows how to do anything. Most people now, if you were to say, okay, you're going to go camping for a week and you're going to have to figure out how to cook your own food on a fire, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Never mind, grow your own food and tend to it and take care of yourself and your family.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that like people are getting away from the more, and I see it now these days. People are just more interested. The whole idea of the family is starting to fall apart more and more every single day, and it's just you can see it throughout the way that people raise their kids. You see it through the way that people are. The people, how the divorce rate goes. Nobody really wants to fix anything anymore. And one thing
No.
I've actually wondered about that is I wonder if the way that we do our technology these days actually has played a factor in that because there was a time when things were built to last. Nowadays, things are built to break down. And when something breaks down, you just throw it away. And I see how many people do this with their they do this with their relationships. It's like you get into a little small fight or a disagreement with a friend. Well, then just go make a new friend and don't talk to that person anymore. And I've always wondered if there was a correlation there.
That's an interesting perspective. I never thought of it, but it really does make perfect sense. People will say, you're absolutely right. Everything is throwaway. Nothing is worth fixing. And I mean, I talked to a girl the other day who was 25 years old and getting divorced.
Whoa, that's
25 years old.
she must have only just gotten married recently, like within the last year or two at most.
I, well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh my goodness sakes, so what is going on?
That's a good question. Yeah, I actually I was pretty young when I got married too. I was just turned 24 actually when I got married. But thing is now is like I'm in it for the long run. That's maybe it's because my parents are still together and they've had
Oh,
their own
yeah.
problems. They've had their own problems, but they've always worked through them. I mean, they've had some huge fights when I was a kid, but no matter whatever went down, they always managed to talk it out, always managed to work through it. So I have no plans of ever divorcing my wife or anything like that. But probably this is also a big thing. You learn from your parents, so
Yeah.
if you learn from your parents, so if you're seeing it like the way it is now, when people just divorce whenever the going gets a little tough, then I think it's just going to continue that way. I mean, 52% of marriages or something end in divorce now, or something like that.
Oh, I would even say that's a low ball number. Like, people, you're right. People have no in it for the long haul. And I'm noticing just when I look around, because of course, the more you become aware of what's going on, the more you look around and you can see it. I mean, how many blue-haired, overweight, little tiny car driving SJWs does one city need?
Uh,
Right? With Hello Kitty stickers on the back of their car. You know fucking well she's not married.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it's actually these days a lot of people are they're going against that. They don't want to get married. They don't need to
Yeah.
get married. But the thing is too when we're talking about that is it's been proven that it may you may be happy for the first little part of your life, but once you get into the later part of your life, a lot of people are unhappy when they don't get married. Not everyone. I'm sure there's many people that are happy to be single their entire lives, but most people need that companionship. They want that family, but it's this idea that's getting pushed these days that you don't need that in order to be happy or to be successful. But the other thing about family is you have something worth working for and fighting for with that.
You do. And you also have somebody to rely on. I mean, I'm finding out, um, my family history is pretty whacked out. You would need a pen and a piece of paper to just write the shit down. But I made it a commitment of myself when I separated from my daughter's dad that I was going to be that person to change that shit because, and exactly like you said, whatever your parents did, that's what you know. And so, I see single moms who are out drinking and partying on the regular basis or sleeping with this guy and that guy and bringing guys home, and introducing them to their kids. And then they break up and they're gone again. And you're like, it's just a nightmare. You can't imagine what these poor kids are going through, right? I don't date at all. I have a kid and that's it. You know what I mean? Like it's just disrespectful to your child. And what the hell are you trying to teach these kids? And when do you have the time? When do you have, like, please tell me when you have this spare time to go out slutting around because that would be the time I would use to read my book.
That's all.
I just,
Especially when you have kids, you got to look after your kids, and if you're not doing that, you gotta have a babysitter for them. So there really isn't much time these days between work and taking care of family for something like that.
and for the amount of money people get paid, and these, back in the day, somebody would offer to babysit and they'd be like, oh, I don't care, whatever you give me, a couple bucks or something. Now these kids want like $10 an hour. So you're going out paying to do whatever it is you're doing, and you're also paying for someone else to be home with your child. It's very odd. People have more money than me. Maybe that's what it is.
Well,
And I'm not interested, right? I got no interest in going out doing that. It just doesn't do it for me.
yeah, eh? Yeah, I understand
Mm-mm.
what you mean. I'm not the most I guess I would say I'm much more introverted. I need to sort of know the people at least a little bit before I get to be a little more like that. And I was actually when the first time that I came on to the stream with Little Gray Cells and everyone was there, Meme Druid yourself. I was actually a little nervous just because I didn't know anybody, and at least in my old a few years ago, being around strangers like that, I found it very difficult in order to have conversations with people. I just didn't know what to say. Do I talk about myself? Do I talk about you? Do I talk about this certain subject? I've gotten better with that actually, and I think actually maybe the podcast has something to do with that. Just as I'm just speaking more, I'm getting better at that. But a lot of people are like that these days, where they're so introverted, un, they're just not good at dealing with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a magnet on my fridge that it says, the more people I meet, the more I like my dog. And, and it is really true because and you know what? But it's a funny thing because Seamus has a lot of faith in people, and I never did. But once I started down this path, and I'm getting to meet kind of like-minded people, such as yourself and Seamus and Steve and Meme and a few different people who seem to genuinely care about like the surrounding good, where they're not, like when you look at people like Alex Jones or what's that guy, Paul Joseph Watson or Tommy Robinson, where, back in the day they would talk heavily about a certain topic and then all of a sudden it seems like they've been bought off with money. There's a few people out there who've been offered to be bought off with a lot of money, And now, and they've just told them off. They've said no, like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep talking out. And those are the people I have respect for and that I'm willing to talk to, because whether we agree or not, we can have a conversation where it's just going to be a conversation.
Yeah, they haven't been influenced by the money yet, and I'm starting to realize that too. Seamus has pointed me towards a few different channels where I'm starting to see those same people that seem to be on the forefront of fighting for our rights actually seem to be paid off. They seem to be bought off, and people and it's just you can't really trust them anymore. It's made me look very differently on a few specific individuals.
Same. Yeah, I've had my eyes open to, like, and I mean the ones that before I was like, yeah, right. I was a hardcore Trump fan, and now I'm like, fuck, not you too. Like, oh, really? That's a hard one for me to swallow, right? I'm still, he's definitely better than Hillary. There's no two ways about that. But oh, even still, I'm like, oh, what a disappointment. I really thought he was going to be like Doug Ford, in a true sense of the fashion. And I do worry because I know Seamus had talked about what that was, that agreement that Cynthia Kinney from, was she in Ohio or Idaho or something, that congressperson who refused to sign the agreement to support Israel and everything,
Hmm.
and then she didn't get any funding for any of her programs. And that kind of thing doesn't necessarily have to stop at the border. So I wonder how influential that kind of thing is in Canada, right? I mean, Doug Ford right now is awesome, but what if next week he just turns?
It's possible. You never know if he ends up getting paid off. I mean, I would like to start looking into who's financing him just to know, because
Yeah,
if it's the same people that are buying off a lot of these other people, then we would know. And I'd rather know who I'm dealing with than anything else,
yeah,
because it's only recently that I've started to see exactly what you're talking about when you're in regards to Trump and sort of the people that have funded him and paid him off. It's a lot of the same people that have already bought off a lot of the other politicians.
that's
And
right.
every time I see something like this, and it just opens my eyes a little bit more, it just reminds me of a line by George Carlin, who is he's one of my favorite comedians.
He's funny.
He was funny, but he was also awake. He knew what was going on, and there was, I think it was one of his final specials that he did before he died. He ended up talking just about how politicians are put in place to give you the illusion that you have choice. You don't. You have
You don't.
owners. They own you. They've bought off all the big companies. They bought off the Congress. They bought off the Senate. They bought off all the judges and all the big media companies. Pretty much, and I think he finishes up by saying something along the lines of, they got you by the balls. And the more
Yeah.
and more I'm starting to wake up, the more and more I'm starting to see this. So I've actually started to go back and listen to him again, but I'm starting to pay a lot closer attention to what he's saying, and I'm trying to sort of pick up on those hidden messages he might have been putting out there.
Same, same exactly. But I do find, I mean, Sheer to me is just
Oof.
not even, oh, it's a sad, I mean, I knew that going in, I had people in my life talking about Sheer, and I was like, eh. And I certainly didn't vote for Sheer. Actually, I voted for Kelly Leach, and the more I think about it, the more I think she was put in place to make votes from people such as myself irrelevant. I think she was a distraction.
Oh, really, eh?
I do, and I don't know if I'm right, and I have no proof of it, but I tend to go on my feeling, my gut feeling, and that's what I think. I think she was the only person who focused on that immigration thing, and so she would have gotten all. For me, my before the election, I said, like, there are no other issues, right? Because I didn't know, and I said there are no other issues if you don't have this immigration thing under control. Nothing else is matter. It matters because the rest of us, everything else is fucked if we don't get this under control.
Absolutely. And actually, just a quick message for Perseus Gold in the chat. You were mentioning that you might want to come on the show. I dropped my email in the chat. Send me an email, and we'll get in contact through there, and maybe find a more direct way to get in contact, and we'll set up a date. But what you were talking about too is I always found myself a fan of Bernier, even when they were
Yes.
running. I
Yeah.
kind of, for a little bit, maybe considered the possibility of Kevin O'Leary, but he never really stuck for me, even though he
No.
was the front runner. So when he dropped out, especially, the one I was going for was Bernier, and I was disappointed that he didn't end up winning. I'm disappointed that though he's been treated the way he has over the last few months, but he always to me seemed very legitimate. He spoke what he said what he wanted to say, and he believed in things that were better for the people. But and there are things that he's done in the past that aren't exactly good. I mean, he was the one that left those secret documents at his girlfriend's place that
Yeah,
was
right.
related to the Hell's Angels, so that was not a good idea. But all in all,
uh,
he's one that's actually spoken out about the real issues that we're facing right now, but he
yeah.
seems to be the only one from the Conservative Party.
Well, and that's a very true statement, and I'm with you there because after Kelly Leach, I voted for him second, and I really believe that he won that election. I do not believe it was a legitimate win for Andrew Scheer. I really don't. I don't think that there was enough people who would have voted for somebody who seemed like such a pansy. Um, but maybe I'm wrong, but that's not what I think. Um, and I would like to see Doug Ford and Maxime Bernier create a Canadian national party. And I don't mean like a white national party, I mean Canadian, right? Native Indian people, black people, white people, people who are from Canada, who want to fit in, who want to be safe from running into fucking Yazidi kidnappers on the fucking transit in London, Ontario. People who don't think our welfare program should support criminals or people who've never put into it. To me, I don't understand why our welfare would ever go to somebody who's never paid into it. It's like me saying, well, Adrian, I know you got a big fat bank account. You put money in there for you and your wife, but fuck you, buddy. I want that money and I'm having it. And it doesn't matter that I never put it there.
Hey, that's pretty
Right?
much what they're doing right now. And my problem with Andrew Scheer was mostly how he never stuck to his guns or his principles. I mean, he was a Roman Catholic, and one of the first things he said was, "I'm not going to open the debate on abortion." Which, I mean,
Yeah.
you need to at least we have to have that conversation for the what the numbers are. I mean, it's almost a quarter of pregnancies in Canada end in abortion, so that is definitely a conversation we should have.
Yeah.
When people asked him about him being a male feminist, he pretty much just went along with it. He's like, "Oh yes, I'm absolutely a male feminist." He talks about freedom of speech, but then he silences anybody that doesn't go along with his narrative. He to me
Yeah.
just seems like a little more toned down version of Trudeau in a lot of ways. So I was never a really big Andrew Scheer fan. I liked the way that he hammered Trudeau in question period, but that's
Yeah.
about the only praise that I can really give him.
He did do a good job hammering him in the House of Commons and against the ISIS things and that sort of thing. He definitely did, but I can't see him making any real any real changes, and I don't have any faith in him at all. And I've found recently that all the people who I've been told I'm not supposed to like, I feel like I agree with them a lot. Like, again, I know that Hell's Angels are not supposedly good guys, but where I grew up, I spent some time in Nanaimo, and like they hold fundraisers for children's charities. They have legitimate businesses. They're legitimate people. I mean, I'm sure there's a criminal element to them as there is to every group or whatever, but I don't think I would have a problem if Maxime Bernier, Doug Ford, um, collaborated with like white or not white. I don't mean white. What I mean is like old stock Canadian. I say white. I got to get out of that habit. When I say that, I mean like old stock Canadians who've been here contributing wherever you're from. If you have Canadian values, to me, you're Canadian, and I don't care if you're fucking green, except that if you are green, you might have an issue. But color to me doesn't matter. It's all about how you feel and what you do. And we're known to be hardworking, um, friendly people who want to help each other. And if you can fit into that, I don't care who you are. Come and be part of it. I don't agree with our welfare system. I would like to see those guys stand up and do this Canadian Nationalist Party, which I would love to see. It would be really awesome. I also think, though, that we need to get Andrew Scheer into office and then have that happen.
I know what you mean because when 2019 comes around, I plan to be voting for Scheer over anybody else. It's
Yes.
sort of the idea that he's better than the alternative. He's better than Jagmeet Singh, who is just another Justin Trudeau. He just believes
Oh
that
my
Trudeau
gosh.
doesn't go far enough in his policies,
Yeah.
which is scary to even think about. And
It's
then
terrifying. Yes.
I've had enough of Trudeau for one lifetime. And even as I'm looking into Pierre Elliott Trudeau, I'm realizing that we're dealing with a
Whoa.
lot of the same things that we dealt with back in those days. I know that Pierre Trudeau was actually detrimental for our alliance with America. He actually full out said that he believed during the Cold War that America was a bigger danger to Canada than Russia was.
I remember hearing that.
Yeah, he
How
full
is
out
that
said it.
even possible?
I don't know. I mean, he was like presenting it as if they were the aggressors that were going to cross our border and nuke us or something like that. When they were actually, if anything, the ones protecting us from the Russians at the time, from the Soviets. I mean, we don't have a good nuclear program and nuclear defense program. So even though we don't
No,
have much,
Canada, we don't have nuclear defense. Do we have like any weapons at all that are not like old and decaying that nobody knows how to fix or run?
ugh,
Fuck.
serious. Actually,
I have a slingshot.
there's a comedian out there called a Canadian comedian called Jeremy Hotz, and he was always making jokes about the Canadian military. Like he was
Oh,
saying, like
fuck.
we should just
Not
invade
the one.
Turkey. No one would see it coming. Look, here come the Canadians. Yeah, here come the Canadians with their plastic forks and knives. Flee the village.
It's a fucking joke. It's such a joke. And I mean, with all due respect to the Canadian men and women who are in our military, I mean, my gosh, it really is. There's a lot of people out there who are quote unquote in the military who, I've seen these folks overweight. They sit at a desk job, they pull in a military government pension, and they don't do sweet fuck all. And I mean, I do thank anybody for their service who works in national defense, but goodness sakes, I've met some of these people. I'm like, if you were after me, you might catch me because I was laughing so hard that you were trying to catch me, but that would be it. It's just funny. And the amount of money we spend paying these people to do nothing. What are they doing?
It's a good
I don't know.
question. I mean, if we're not doing stupid UN missions somewhere like Mali, then I don't know exactly what they're doing from a day-to-day
Oh,
basis.
you know what? I remember what they're doing. We are processing illegal border crossers. That's doing,
Hardly.
right? Thank God we have them there in place so that these folks can be processed quickly and be placed on welfare ahead of everybody else. Fuck.
I mean, from what I see from the video and pictures from down at the border, they seem to be just setting up the camps right now in order for everybody to come in, which pretty much sets up a slum right on our own border. That's the way I've
Oh, yeah.
classified it over the last couple of years. It's just we literally have tent cities and slums on our border now from everything that's going on. It's absolutely
It,
ridiculous.
it is ridiculous and it's scary, right? I mean, how I think, and of course, everything happens for a reason. But if correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that Montreal banned. Did they ban the hijab in Montreal?
They tried to. That ended up getting overturned.
Oh, it did. Okay. Because I was wondering about that. I thought that would be a really, really great way to make the people crossing illegally disperse throughout the rest of the country rather than all staying in Montreal.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting way to do it. I mean, the other thing is too, though, when we're talking about that, is the problem is having to do with jobs. I mean, we've had very few jobs created in 2018, and then we're having thousands of people cross the border. How are they supposed to find work if there's not any new jobs being created out there? It's like there's nothing that's there for them, which means that they're just going to be sitting on the welfare system.
Well, and there's that, and there's just this other thing that I just think is so funny. These state of cognitive dissonance, right? You have all these SJWs talking about the environmental issue, and how, we're contributing to horrible this and that, climate change, all this other nonsense that people are doing. And I'm sure on some level we are making a change with the chemicals that we're putting into the environment and that sort of thing. But that's not your everyday person, right? That's big industries, that's fucking chemtrails, that's deliberate actions in order to fuck up our environment. But you and I sitting around here running our houses and running our cars, we are not contributing to this big major situation that's going on. With that said, we're being blamed for it by all these SJWs. Now, to me, taking a shit ton of people from a country or many countries that don't have the industrial carbon footprint that we have, because, as Canadians, we're bad polluters, bad guys. They don't have any of that. They don't have running water. They don't have steam mills. They don't have tar sands. They don't have any of these other things to create pollution. And so rather than leaving them there with a small carbon footprint, we bring them here and add to our carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. The thing about that, too, is there was an article released not too long ago which said that climate change skeptics actually do more to reduce their carbon footprint than those that are advocating for climate change. And you can see it with the sort of people that we see. I mean, Al Gore has made millions of dollars on this, and he goes all over the world to talk about it.
Jet.
In a jet, probably a private jet, which private jets are some of the most wasteful things ever. And also jets, actually, they say, are a lot worse for the environment than cars or anything else. And then we also have someone else like Catherine McKenna's another one who she's constantly flying everywhere for these climate summits. But again, she's using the jumbo private jets in order to get there. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Come on now, she's riding that bike.
Yeah, whenever there happens to be a camera nearby, she'll be riding that bike. I gotta say though, it's like she even posted something on Twitter the other day. I honestly thought it was like it got posted by her child or something, but it was only a couple days ago when it ended up raining in Ottawa, and then she ended up posting a picture of a puddle, and she said, there are not a lot of puddles out today, but I made sure I ran through every single one. That sounded like something a child would say.
What a fucking... She's a blubbering idiot. She really is. Like, when she talks, she's like, are you for real? What is wrong with your head? And then it's even scarier to think that she's got children.
Oh, yeah, it's similar to the thought of Justin Trudeau having children.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's like that article he ended up putting out. It's like, why I'm raising my son feminist or something like that.
God. Yeah, it's just a funny situation. Everything is totally backwards, and people are teaching these kids these totally wrong things. And when you're trying to teach them the right thing, you get condemned for it. And, you have so many people on medication for things like depression and, oh, I feel sad, so let's put you on medication. And I think it's a way for the government to have a sort of a built-in excuse to take away your kids, right? If something happens where little Johnny comes home and all of a sudden she wants to be called Janine and you say no, right? They come in and take your kid and they say, well, the mom is on medication for depression and it's not a good environment. That whole, they make it sound. So it's sort of a built-in way to just scoop your kids and to be in charge of them.
Oh, absolutely. And as I've sort of looked into the laws that are both in Canada and America surrounding this sort of idea, I've noticed that they can take your kids away for almost anything these days. There was a mother, and I believe this was a Canadian mother, who had her kids taken away, and she had to fight to get them back, and her crime was letting them play outside by themselves.
What?
Yeah, that's all she did. All they did was play outside by themselves, and that was enough for them to come in and at least remove her children temporarily, so claiming that it was neglect.
Oh my gosh.
I actually ended up doing a video or two on this. I'm trying to remember what I called it. I'm just looking through now. But I ended up dealing. I was talking about mostly it was dealing more in America, but it was talking about child protective services, and that was kind of scary because there was a whole system built around that, and the whole idea was that you is that the children getting taken away, that's where they get their funding from. So it's almost within Child Protective Services' best interest to take your children away.
Yeah.
And what was also very concerning is there's actually a short documentary out there called Innocence Destroyed. It's by this guy called Bill Bowen, and it's only about a half an hour long, and it was very damaging. He said he got started off on looking into Child Protective Services because he ended up getting into it because somebody came to him because he was like an old lawyer or something. And he said that the guy had his children taken away by Child Protective Services and that there was a huge discrepancy between the court documents and the transcripts. So Bill Bowen ended up, he sort of wasn't sure about it, but he says, I'll take a look into it. And he said when he looked through the two, there was over 1,000 mistakes that were made. Yeah, 1,000, and they blamed it on the woman who did the transcripts. But they spoke to her, and she even said that she copied it down properly. That they was intentionally it was intentionally screwed with. And then he started looking into more of these cases, and he realized that there were a lot of situations where they screwed with what was actually the facts that were being said. Another case was that a father was accused of abusing his children, I think both physically and sexually. And they even had the mother coming out against this idea and saying he has never done this to our children, but they changed around the transcripts in order to make it seem as if he was doing this sort of thing. Also, the other problem is that there was a lot of family overlap when it came to a lot of these service workers for Child Protective Service and people that were involved in the court system. So sometimes the person who was the service worker was like cousins with the judge or something like that. So it was a
Oh
whole
my
industry
gosh.
built around just taking away people's children. It's called Innocence Destroyed, and I highly recommend everybody take a look at it. I ended up episode 37 of my podcast I was talking about. It's called CPS and Hollywood's Evil Deeds because I was also talking about another company that was called Digital Entertainment Network, which was sort of like the Netflix of its time back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it was their whole point was taking TV show quality, TV quality shows and putting them up on the internet. But what they really end up doing is they were bringing in a bunch of children, and then the three guys that were around it were pedophiles, and they were just abusing and sexually assaulting all the children that were coming in. It was really disturbing.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I feel like not too long ago, like, within the last 10 years or so, there was a big bust, for lack of a better word, of like 400 high level people in Ontario with regards to a pedophilia ring. And I only remember it with those details that it was like high level people and connected to people in the States. And I never heard anything else about it.
I've noticed
Oh,
how they go and protect those people because there was a bust in Hollywood. I think it was early 2007 or 2017, sorry, or late 2016. They said some of over 200 people ended up getting arrested. Some of them were household names. No matter where I looked, could not find the names of who they were
nope.
talking about.
That was the same with this one, and I seem to remember it being 400 or more as the number of people they caught. And again, like you said, it was high level people, like, well known names. What I was going to say earlier, we were talking about Justin Trudeau and Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Have you heard of Kathy O'Brien?
The name rings a bell.
So Kathy O'Brien was an MK Ultra mind control victim. And her
Oh,
story is
yes.
pretty crazy. But she names people. And I sometimes I get her confused with this other lady named Bryce Taylor. Bryce Taylor was owned by Bob Hope. And Kathy O'Brien was owned by Gerald Ford. And her story is unbelievable. Like, I recommend everybody listen to her story, and you may think that it's absolutely beyond all comprehension, and then look into something called the Allen Memorial in Quebec or Montreal. That's a mental health facility that you can't get into unless somebody buzzes you in. But what she was saying, she named people who raped her when she was a little kid, like 10, 11 years old, and one of the people she named as a rapist of her was Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
I
Right.
actually a little while ago started up doing another investigation because one of the things I focused on investigative pieces have been pedophiles and pedophile rings, and I
Oh,
just came across Kathy O'Brien. That was why I rang a bell. As soon as you started bringing up about Pierre Elliott Trudeau, I remembered her.
yeah.
I haven't looked too much in her story. I'm going to have to go back and check that out though.
Oh, buddy, I'm telling you, like, and it's funny with some of these YouTube videos, it's you sit there for the 2 hours or whatever it is, and you're just mesmerized. And of course, that leads to something else, that leads to something else. And the people who talk about it are absolutely credible, and the things that they're telling you. And then, like I said, you look into it further and you find out that Canada has the Allen Memorial where they did MK Ultra mind control. There's actually documentaries on some of the things that this one particular doctor, I can't recall his name at the moment, but tests and experiments on people in Montreal, and that hospital is still open.
It's still
And
open.
oh
Oh
yeah, it's still
man.
open. Oh, and it's creepy. This man and woman did a YouTube video on it. I cannot remember what they called themselves, but they were in the parking lot talking about the Allen Memorial, and maybe it was just that it was a rainy day or whatever, but it was creepy when they were out there. And then they went inside, and they were allowed to like go into the foyer in between the first doors and the second doors, nothing but a couple of steps going up, and you cannot get into it past that point without being buzzed in.
Huh.
And the video of it, commented on the bottom. I said, "Fuck, man, that seems really creepy. Like, gives you the heebie-jeebies when you just see it." And they said, "Oh man, you should have been there. Like, it's really creepy."
I might one day have to make a trip down there to see if I can go and pay a visit to that hospital because that would be very interesting to see.
I think so too. But yeah, check that out. It's very creepy. And the MK Ultra, Jay Myers Documentaries is a channel that it was like Cracko Vision for me when I came across it. When you just binge watch it and you're like, holy fuck, I can't believe it. I couldn't believe the stuff that guy is documenting.
It was called Jay Myers documentary.
Yep,
Okay.
JayMyers documentaries.
Myers. All right, I'm gonna have to go check
Yeah,
that out.
yeah. And have you watched Johnny Gat?
That was actually one of the channels that Seamus put me on. I've started watching through
Same.
those videos.
Yeah, he's got some good stuff.
Yeah, actually, when I was talking to Seamus off air about that last time, I was saying to him, I think what makes Johnny Gat so effective is he doesn't need to do a voiceover or anything like that. He lets the information speak for himself. He just takes articles and videos, smashes them all together, and doesn't say a word, and that's
Yeah.
enough to in order to just you see it for yourself. You
Yeah.
don't have somebody in your ear telling you this is how it is, this is how it is. Like, here's all the information, guys.
Yeah, make of it what you will.
Make of it as we will. Yeah, as I've actually really gotten into Johnny Gat's videos recently, and it was one of those videos where I found out about Trump. I think it was the video was called something along like
Yeah.
who
Who
actually owns
owns,
America.
who actually controls, yeah.
Yes, who actually controls America.
Same. And I was like, oh, that was like a hard pill to swallow. It really was. And I think anybody who watches that, like, I was a hardcore Trumper, hard fucking core Trump all the way, like all the way. I get off topic. I apologize. That was another thing I was thinking of. All those folks that we're not supposed to agree with. I've been watching like Louis Farrakhan,
Hmm.
and he's got a lot of very, very good points.
I'm not too familiar with Farrakhan. I've heard of him, and my buddy Bold has done a couple of videos where he's critical of it. It's called the hashtag Farrakhan feminism, where he's kind of
Oh,
talking about the feminists, how they surround Farrakhan. But I don't actually know much about Farrakhan.
from what I gather, I found myself I'm moving. I think I told you, and so I
Yeah.
was cleaning the other day, and I had his video. He's a I don't know if he's an imam, but he's a preacher of Islam. But he also talks about the whole Jewish question, and he just hates Jewish people, like fucking hates them. And he seems to hate white people too, sort of. And then you listen to him further on other points, and he doesn't hate you really have to listen to him. Like he talks about um, just believing in yourself and having good energy and putting out good things out there, and he's got a bad reputation, but I'm finding those folks that tell me that don't listen to that guy, he's a whatever. Those are the folks I go and listen to, and I find I agree with a lot of what they say. Malcolm X is another one, right? Back in the day, I was like, fuck that guy. I didn't know anything about him. I was just beaking off because I was an idiot. And now I'm listening to him going, yeah, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there 100%. I mean, I don't agree with anybody on everything 100%, but on certain topics, I'm like, yep, you got me there. 100, I'm with you.
I've seen a few of his videos, and it was a couple of things he said was very startling. Like I think he was one of the ones who was saying that to the black community that he was saying something about beware like the white liberal or something like that. They're the ones who are trying to keep you enslaved or
Yeah.
something along those lines.
Yep. And
And
and it's true.
well, the way that the Democratic Party is acting these days, it definitely seems to be true. I mean, they're the ones that are constantly trying to keep black people on their side by telling them how oppressed they are, and they need the Democrats in order to fight for them. But the amount of black people that I've also started to see that are talking about once they got away from that ideology, they just felt so liberated. They felt so free.
Yeah. Well,
Some
I never understand how you can look at somebody who's black and say, effectively, based on, affirmative action, you're black, therefore you won't make it unless I help you. If that's not the most fucking racist thing you could possibly say to somebody.
Absolutely. That's always one thing I felt about
Fuck,
affirmative action. It's just like you need us in order to give you a step up because you
because
can't
you're
do it
not
on your
good
own.
enough. Right? What is that?
And the thing is, too, is it just breeds a lot of resentment among people. I mean, for instance, they like to use that in colleges and universities these days, but then at the same time, it's not white people that are getting affected by that. It's actually the Asians that are being kicked out of high-end schools because of it.
That's right. I can't, I haven't seen the numbers to confirm this, but my understanding is that if you're black, you need a lower score to be approved in university. Yeah, and if you're Asian, you have to have a higher score.
Yep, I believe that's how it works these days. It's just rigging the game against both these people.
It's just the weirdest thing. And after that hijab hoax,
Hmm.
when they were talking, she was blaming an Asian man. There's that guy who came out on a YouTube channel, and I think his name is Hijab Hoax, but I could be wrong. And he's an Asian guy. Do you know who I mean? And he goes to like all the protests talking about like how racist that was.
Yeah, I think I do know who you're talking about. I didn't know his name, but I've seen a few people clip his videos before, and they posted it around.
Yeah, and it's just funny to me. At one point, I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if the fight for Canada and free speech, because there's a lot of like Korean, Chinese, Oriental, Asian folks, and a lot of Middle Eastern folks as well. But wouldn't it be funny if the fight for Canada came down to like a bunch of Chinese people fighting a bunch of Islamists? What the
You
fuck?
You're not exactly wrong. I mean, I think it was about 2 months ago now. I went to my very first protest where I heard that people were walking from Ottawa City Hall all the way to Parliament in protest of Justin Trudeau and a lot of his policies. I'm not kidding you. Half the people there were Chinese, and they were
Yeah.
Chinese people that were there that were talking about how they left China because of the way that things were going. They came here, and then they're starting to see that with the way Justin Trudeau's going, it's very similar to the stuff that they face back home. One guy actually full out said, he's like, I see what Justin Trudeau's doing. It's the communist way. This was a Chinese man. So you're not exactly wrong on that.
Well, and when they were having I don't know what you call it, organizations of people talking out about M103, a lot of the people who were talking out were Muslims. Like they did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of interviews, not mainstream media, but other folks did a lot of interviews at those conventions or those meetings where it's Islamic people who are like, I can see what's happening here. Like this happened at home, and that's why I moved, and I'm not now. We're not safe, and blah blah blah, and they don't want to bring that shit behind them. They left that place for a reason.
I've been very critical a lot of times of Islam on this podcast, but that was one thing when I saw that. It actually really gave me it really warmed me inside to see that so many of these people were actually fighting back against what they left. And that's the thing that's killing me about the way that Justin Trudeau's policy is going is
Yeah.
this is what made Canada such a great country. This is the very thing that people are fleeing from, and all he wants to do is bring it over here.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the thing. And I don't understand. To me, people say, oh, Africa is a scary place or it's bad, or they talk about how it being a shithole country. But when you stop and think about it, the country itself is nothing more than dirt and rocks and trees or whatever the fuck they have over there. The people are what make it either a shithole country or not. What makes you think you can bring people from their country? They walk across our border and then all of a sudden it's fucking rainbows and unicorns. Which pisses me off that rainbows and unicorns have been destroyed for me. Fuck, it makes me mad.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. And the thing is, too, it also just depends on the type of people we're bringing. I mean, if you're bringing people that have kind of always, like, if we're talking about Africa, they kind of got into the with the groups and the gangs back then, then they're going to bring that over. But if you're bringing in the average person from Africa, they're actually quite nice and decent people. A guy I used to work with, he was from Africa, from Ghana, and he was one of the nicest person I ever met in my life. Never
yeah,
got angry, never looked at the bad side, always looking on the bright side of life. It was unbelievable how good this person was. He was honestly one of the best persons I ever met in my entire life. It just depends on who they are and what they've gone through in their life and what they're bringing with them. I mean, if you're going to have somebody who's lived with Boko Haram and those sort of people, then they're not going to be good people whatsoever.
no.
Which is why actually I might be a little more critical of Somalia for the way that the sort of the life is over there. I don't know if necessarily these are the best people we could bring in from Africa.
Right, exactly. And I'm with you. I know people from Tunisia who are some of the absolutely nicest people I've ever met, and will give you the shirt off their back. And they're Muslims, but they're lovely. Just like, I'm Christian, but I'm not. I don't know. I don't know. I guess the worst thing Christians can do is like pray for you really hard. I don't know. Like, but you know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter to me what your belief system is, as long as part of that belief is that you believe that I'm allowed to believe what I want to believe. You know,
Absolutely.
if your belief system is that you need to change what I'm doing, then we're going to have a problem. But if you just are like, hey man, peace be upon you and do your thing. And I know a ton of Muslims who are some of the nicest people ever. And, but then I know some Muslims too, where I'm like, I'm going to see that guy in the news one day.
Yeah, it just all depends on how they're brought up and who they are, which is
Yeah.
again why I don't have much support, love, or anything for Omar Khadr. I mean, his father brought him to live with Afghan, the Al Qaeda. He was
Yeah.
like friggin' uh, what's the guy's name? Osama bin Laden was at his sister's wedding. I don't think this is really going to be the best people we can bring over. But if you have people that have lived their entire lives under the heel of these sort of people, where they're not bad people like this, then they're going to come
No.
over and they're going to be happy to be here.
Exactly. And people are so grateful. To be in a country. My boss's boss at work is Islamic, and one of the things he said was that he is just so happy to be living in a country where everybody's free to be what they need to be, and to just succeed and to work hard, and to me, like I said, that is exactly the key. Like, if you have that Canadian value of working hard and being neighborly and fitting in, bring it. Come on over here.
As long as you do it the proper way and don't just cross the border.
Cross the fucking, well, and that's it, right? To me, if you're crossing the border at any spot than where you're supposed to be, you're already breaking the law.
Because, again, they're coming from America. It's not like America is exactly a terrible place to live. In a lot of ways, it's much more prosperous than our own country.
Well, it's so terrible over there that, like, how many Canadians spend half their year there, right? It can't be that bad.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been in America many different times. And you know what? I found the people where there were actually quite nice and decent. I've been to
Yeah.
Florida a few different times, and a lot of the people there were actually quite nice. In a lot of ways, actually, when I was there, I went into, do you know the restaurant, the fast food restaurant Five Guys?
Yes, I do. I have never eaten there, but I know of it.
It's good food, but when I always found that people working the service industry in America were actually in better moods and more polite than the people working in the service industry in Canada.
People in Canada working in service are so rude. Oh my gosh. It's unbelievable. These young people with these crazy hair colors and like piercings all over their face and tattoos. I never understand where these young people get the money for tattoos. They're so expensive. And they're there and you're looking for help, but they're not done with their conversation on their little cell phone yet. So they're not waiting on you yet.
Yeah.
So weird.
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. I still think that on average, that Canadians are more polite and nicer and willing to do more for their neighbors. But I just think that America gets a lot of bad rap from a lot of the rest of the world.
I think so too. And anytime I've ever spoken to an American, I've never had any issues. I haven't traveled much. I'm more definitely a homebody. But yeah, I've never had any problems with them either. They seem all right to me.
Yep, which is why I actually want to solidify our relationship with America again and just get us back on a good point again, because things I don't think we've seen this sort of tension between our two countries since Pierre Elliott Trudeau, actually.
Well, it is a family tradition in their fucked up little family. I don't know. I always thought of Canada as sort of like an annoying little brother to the United States. But this whole restructuring of the culture and dismantling of the value system and general turning upside down of everything that we've ever known is very hard to, I don't know. It's hard to even label. It really feels like you're in some kind of, like, it feels like you woke up at 3 a.m., you got a drink of water, you ate a bag of mushrooms, you went back to bed, and when you woke up, everything was fucked.
That's a good way of describing it. That's a very good way of describing it.
Well, just like, there's no explanation.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't think the situation is going to get any better until we have a change of government. As long as Trudeau and his politically correct liberals are in office, I don't think we're going to have much of a change.
No, me neither.
Well, we're a little past the 2-hour mark. Do you want to end it here?
I think that's a good place to end it. So I really enjoyed this conversation. Anytime you want to do that again, you let me know.
Absolutely. I will definitely be getting you back on the podcast sometime soon, because I really enjoyed this conversation as well.
All right. Well, you have a great day, and God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone, for watching. It was awesome.
Thanks for coming on, Concan. It was great conversation.
Yep. Right back at you. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was awesome to have her on. That was very good. I really enjoyed that conversation, and she's definitely going to be somebody that comes back on the podcast very soon. I hope you all enjoyed listening to Concan. I will link her channel in the description just after I end this. I didn't do it beforehand, and my computer was running really slow, so I didn't want to do it in the middle. But once I link it there, I think everybody should go, and you should go and subscribe to her channel. And I hope you really enjoyed everything we talked about today. We did get a little off topic when discussing it was supposed to be sex ed, Doug Ford, and the Pride Parade, which we did get into, but got off topic on other things. But hey, I thought it was a great conversation. I hope you all really enjoyed it. Oh, we had little gray cells in the channel. How you doing, buddy? I don't know how long